This is how I took a trip to China that only cost me 1 penny. So to set the stage here, I was in college. I only had a week off of school coming up because of spring break, and I didn't want to lose any time. So I set to the internet. I started looking up different flights, trying to find something cheap around the world. And at this point, I had an idea of how I was going to go somewhere for free, but I didn't know if it was exactly going to work yet. So I looked for some very specific criteria. I looked for first cheap flights, because I didn't really have a ton to spend on if this went wrong. I was looking at the actual passenger seat maps when you get to select your seat. I was looking for ones that were almost completely filled up. No seats to pick, or very little. Once I had found those two criteria, I ended up finding a plane that was going to Shanghai, where I set my sights on China. The ticket at the time was $4.93. I bought it. Fast forward a few weeks, I packed up my bag, I got everything ready, everything I needed, and I set off to go to the airport in Boston. If you take a look at me,
No,
this guy,
God!
with that
No,
haircut,
God, please, no!
I went through security check-in, got on my first flight, and connected from Boston over to Canada. When I landed in Canada, this is where I knew things were going to get interesting. I got to the terminal, got ready for my connecting flight, and as I was waiting there, people started piling in more and more and more, to the point where there were no seats in the entire waiting terminal, and people were even standing. And then the moment I was waiting for happened. People were standing around, people were angry and waiting, and the flight attendant at the desk in front of the hallway that brings you into the plane picks up the intercom and says, "Would any passengers that haven't received seat numbers please come up to the front? We have some things to figure out." So me and a few other people get up and make our way over to the flight desk, where the flight attendant just tells us there aren't enough seats on the plane and some of us aren't going to be able to fly. People immediately started getting angry. Some people had a very short time for their vacation. Some people were frustrated and wanted to go back home. It was interesting. There was actually a lady right next to me that was yelling in Mandarin. I have no idea what she was saying, but I can only imagine she was cursing out the flight attendant in Mandarin. And it was a very intense yet kind of funny moment. So I sat there and I let the flight attendant know, "I understand that you don't have enough seats on this plane. I'd be willing to get on another plane in the near future. If you could move me planes, that would be amazing." And after a few seconds and a few changing some things around and talking with them, my first victory. I got moved onto a new plane. And in certain countries, for example, the US and Canada, if you get moved or bumped off of a plane onto another one, your plane ticket has to be refunded. So I got my money back, $4.93. However, the ticket price that I had purchased and the ticket price that it was worth at the moment were now different. The ticket had grown in value from the time that I bought the ticket to the time that I got bumped off the flight. So they had to give me the money of the difference in my plane ticket as well, which ended up giving me a grand total of $1,011 is what my ticket was worth at the time that they bumped me. After all was said and done, I had $518 left over. And then now a challenge went off in my head. How can I spend the next 5 days or 6 days in China and only spend $518? So as I was thinking this, the flight attendant got back to me and let me know that there were no more flights for that day flying to China and that I was going to have to wait until tomorrow. Explained to the flight attendant that I'm not from Canada. I'm actually from Boston. I'm away from home. I don't really have anywhere to go. The flight attendant ended up giving me a taxi to a hotel and food for the night. All of the things that I needed for that night. The night was completely free. I enjoyed a very well-rested night in the hotel, ate a good amount of food, and took a taxi back to the airport in the morning. Went through security, made it back inside, and everything was covered by the cost of the ticket. Once I got back up to the desk, made it all the way through security, I sat down, similar situation. The flight was overbooked. There was way too many people there, and again, I personally this time was called up to the front, them knowing that I was already bumped. I went up to the front and they told me that they didn't really have any economy seats left available on this flight that was going across. So I told them, "Look, I'm on my vacation, I'm coming from school, you guys have already bumped me once, I can't really eat too much more into my time in China because I don't really have a lot of time and I have people waiting for me there." So this kind of created a little bit of a sense of urgency for them. They ended up giving me a seat on the plane. The plane starts boarding, I notice I'm in the first group. I head in and they show me to my seat, and I actually got upgraded to a first class ticket because they didn't have any other seats on the back of the plane because everyone else showed up and no one bought the first class ticket, and they needed to fly me out because they had promised they'd fly me on the next flight. So I enjoyed myself on this first class flight to China, watching my upgraded size TV, kicking back with extra room on my seat, a little blanket, a few other things that they gave me for comfort, and I left Canada and headed all the way across over to Shanghai. I walked out of the plane feeling pretty refreshed. I got a good amount of sleep on the plane. I had $518 left over to make my stay here in China amazing. I wanted to do it for free, so that challenge was still sitting in the back of my head. I started going around to different hostels. I kind of had started this off with a bang, so I didn't really want to cheap out. I could have gotten the cheapest hostel, but I decided not to do that. I went around looking for hostels, and I found a really nice one. It had a really nice common area, bricks, it had a pool table, a nice community. So I went up, and instead of getting a communal room, I paid for a hotel room in the hostel. So I had my own little room, my own little bathroom and bed and everything. And I kept my stuff there, and that cost me $225 about. Now, there was one thing I didn't fully consider until the end. However, each time I bought something, there was an unknown amount that was going to be charged for conversion and an unknown amount for my international roaming fee that was coming off of my card. I ended up adding it all up at the end. However, at the time, I didn't fully recognize this. So I spent $225 plus whatever those extra fees were and started enjoying the rest of my day that day. Played some pool that night with some cool people. Although I had a pretty restful journey over, I was still pretty tired. Flight of about 17 hours will really wipe you out. I made some friends and I went to sleep that night. I got up in the morning and was adamant about starting to explore Shanghai. I got out, and the first thing I was worried about is how am I gonna get food? What is food gonna cost here? I had a few yuan in my pocket that I could buy food with, so I started walking the streets, and to my surprise, there was actually a lot of street vendors all over the place in Shanghai. One of my favorites that I bought there was xiaobing, and it ended up costing me somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 cents per xiaobing. I would eat a few of them at a time, and there was also a few different places I could get sticky buns and pork buns and things like that, so I definitely bought a few of those as well. Those were amazing. Honestly, my favorite was the seaweed bun. All in all, breakfast only ever costed me about 50 cents, so I had a little bit to splurge on. Throughout the days, I would go to different places. I went to a few of the temples in Shanghai. I got to see a really beautiful skyscraper that's kind of, that changes colors, and it looked like this. It was really cool. After checking that out and doing all of that, it ended up costing me it could have been a lot cheaper, but I decided to splurge a little bit, and I ate it on about $10 a day. Actually, there was one time that I went into a dumpling house. It was actually shomai is what I had ended up getting, and it came in this little steamed rack, and there was 6 different shomai inside, and I walked up to one of the places and I ordered 10 shomai, not really knowing what I was ordering, and a few people started laughing at me because first of all, I didn't speak Chinese at all. I knew a few words and my Chinese wasn't very strong, or my Mandarin wasn't very strong, but I asked for 10. They verified with me a few times. I ended up typing it out. They kind of shrugged their shoulders, and I bought 10 stacks of these shrimp shomai. I ended up bringing them out to the table. When I got them, not really thinking too much of it, and immediately all of the locals that were there started looking at me, taking pictures and kind of pointing, and I don't think they believed that I would eat all 10. I started the first one, the second one, the third one, until I got down to 9. At that point, people were kind of coming up and taking pictures with me. Honestly, I did not do Americans justice there. I definitely ate way more than I needed to, and it really made us look bad, so I'm sorry guys, that one's on me. But it was amazing, it tasted really good, and I do not regret it. So that was a great experience. Other than that, I kind of roamed around Shanghai so far, but all of the things and sightseeing that I was doing so far was relatively cheap and free. The temples just require small amounts of donations. All of the people that I saw, we'd meet up and eat food. I got to travel around the city. I spent a very, very small amount on the subways there. Honestly, amazingly beautiful and clean subway systems in Shanghai. It's actually an amazing place to visit. And at that time, I decided to take a day trip. So I went over to the train station, these beautiful trains, and I literally just said, I'm going to go wherever the next train is going, and I bought the ticket, and I cannot tell you where it went. No idea where I ended up, but I made it there. And once I made it there, I got off the train, and I was literally the only tourist. I went somewhere that was definitely meant for only locals. It was not pretty at all, but as soon as I stepped off, there was this massive mall. And when I say massive, it was multiple stories, long lines of just aisles of different people's wares. And when I say massive, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 2 miles by 2 miles. Like, this thing was humongous. It was massive. There was people riding carts through the middle. There was people taking motorcycles and going up the stairs and then going through the aisles. And I was walking around. I ended up spending a decent amount of money on the train ticket over, and also all the different things I bought. I bought some clothes, some souvenirs. I figured since I made it somewhere with all this stuff, I might as well spend some money and enjoy the mall that I was at, because this was the day trip that I had planned. I walked through, and as I was walking through and buying things, you had to watch as you were going through the different aisles and passing through cross sections, because people would be ripping through on their motorcycles to get wherever they needed to get. They would hit a corner and they would drop their foot down and curve onto the next one and basically just do a quick turn onto the next aisle and run down that one. You could hear the motorcycles everywhere, and honestly, I was kind of walking around and I almost got smashed into by a couple motorcycles, just not knowing what was going on and being the dumb American that I was. All in all, I left unscathed, and the whole trip itself cost me about $90, the day trip to God knows where. But it was a great experience, and honestly, I really felt like I got to connect with the locals a little bit more. I had some more in-depth conversations. Some of them spoke English. I had gotten pretty good at using the translator and speaking some of my words that I had learned along the way, and made some good friends there, and got back on the train and made my way back to Shanghai. Didn't have much time left, and I really didn't have much money left, and honestly, I'd kind of lost track of my money at this point, but I knew I had a little bit left. I had some friends that I was from Shanghai that were all travelers that I was about to leave and head back to the US, so I wanted to take a minute and have dinner with all of them. I decided to pay for the group. We all went out, had a really nice dinner at this Italian place, and I know Italian in China doesn't really sound like the first choice, but honestly, it was really good, and it's where they wanted to go. I wanted to kind of have a pretty great night with them, and we all enjoyed. They had bought me a few things along the way, so I figured it was my turn to kind of pay it forward. We all enjoyed the rest of the night, and then I went back to my hostel, slept, and went home in the morning. I got on a plane, flew back. I wasn't lucky enough to get first class on the way back. However, it was free, so I wasn't complaining. After not too long, I had ended back up in Boston. I was going through my account, adding up everything that I had spent and all the international fees and everything. And as luck would have it, after everything was said and done, the only thing that I paid for that entire trip was this penny. Well, maybe not this one, but I only paid 1 penny for the whole trip, and I had an amazing experience. So whenever you go to buy your plane tickets, or whenever you're deciding where you're gonna go, try to think, how can I get this paid for? How can I do this for free? What way can I get around paying for this trip? In my mind, I knew about the plane bumping system, and I decided to try to play around with that and see how I could get a better flight. If you want to learn more about different flight tips, or if you want to learn more about traveling for cheap or finding different ways to get from A to B in the nicest yet cheapest way possible, you can check out some of my other videos or subscribe, and let me know down below in the comment section what you want to hear about next, because I want to bring you all my travel tips that I've learned along the way. Thank you guys, and keep being you.